Picture, if you will, a typical allotment or garden. Everything looks normal and quiet. Vegetables growing, bees busy pollinating, a trowel and a kneeler left lying on a path. But we are about to discover that all here is not what it seems to be. Have you ever had the experience of not being able to find where you left your tools, or just, for a fleeting moment, thought your compost bin was watching you? Come with me through the wooden shed door to discover another dimension. A dimension not only of odd bits and pieces, but of tools with their own lives. It sits in the middle of the ground between light and shadow, between the compost bin and the patch of weeds, and it lies between the sharp bit of one's shears and the summit of one's horticultural knowledge. This is the dimension of gardening imagination. It is an area which we call the Tools Life Zone. Come with me now to visit old Mr. Nooney's allotment. He's a man who can't throw anything away. You know the type. You might even be one yourself. He keeps boxes and boxes of things that might be useful. You know the type of box I mean. You might even have one yourself. Odd lengths of string, buttons you don't recognize, keys for locks that no longer exist. But something strange has happened inside of one of Mr. Nooney's boxes. The tiny remnants of netting, broken sticks, old plant labels, and impractical bits of wire have magically come together to form a little creature, one that Mr. Nooney has never seen and never will see, for it only comes out when he is not around. Meet Imbu. His name comes from the first letters of the words, I might be useful. And today we will witness him live up to that name as we learn a valuable life lesson in the Tools Life Zone. Imbu loves to be helpful, and he's always busy looking after the vegetable plants. Gardeners often think that they are the ones responsible for bountiful crops, but they have no clue about the unseen help they get. Today, our hero, Imbu, sees a tray of young kale to plant on the allotment. Old Mr. Nooney had prepared their bed and then gone to have a cup of tea. But when he'd finished his cuppa, he forgot all about the plants. He is so forgetful. You know the type. You might even be one yourself. Imbu has decided to plant them for him. He just needs something to make the holes. He wants a dibber, but no ordinary dibber. We join him as he goes to find Grumpy Dibber. Yes, you heard right. This dibber has a name, and like all the tools on the allotment, it has its own personality, in this case, a grumpy one. As Imbu passes the leeks, he finds a line of unfinished holes just in front of the marigold flowers, but there is no sign of Grumpy Dibber. Where could he be? Imbu goes to the allotment's local shop owner and entrepreneur, Reese the Fleece, to see if he knows where Grumpy is. Reese knows everything that's going on in the allotment, and if he doesn't know something, he probably knows someone who does. Now prepare yourself for another shock, for not only can these creatures and tools move around the allotment, doing chores and selling goods, but they can also talk. You just won't ever hear them yourself. But trust me when I tell you what they say. Reese can be found in his bargain store, laying out his stock, when Imbu arrives to ask if he's seen Grumpy. I've heard old Mr. Nooney couldn't find him neither, so he's bought himself a new dibber, but not for my shop, mind. I don't traffic in dibbers, not any more like. A new dibber to replace Grumpy, says Imbu. He isn't the type of dibber who'd run off. Something must be wrong. Well, perhaps you should go and ask that new dibber if he's seen Grumpy. I think you'll find him by the lettuces. and ask him if he wants to buy a new hat while you're there. So Imbu heads off, and sure enough, standing in front of a curly lettuce is a bright, shiny, clean, new Dibber. Hello, my name's Imbu. Who are you? My name is Flash Dibber. He certainly does look very flash, thinks Imbu. I'm looking for Grumpy Dibber. Have you seen him? Sorry, I've not seen him. I think he's left the allotment for pastures new, which is why old Mr. Nooney had to buy me, says Flash with a flourish. Oh, that doesn't sound like the sort of thing that Grumpy would do. I'm getting worried about him. I think something might be wrong, so I've got to find him. Imbu spends hours making a poster to tell everyone that Grumpy was missing. That evening he fixes it to the shed door, and he hopes that someone will contact him with information about where Grumpy is. However, no one comes forward. We join him next morning as Imbu asks his friend String-along to help him look for Grumpy Dibber. The clue to String-along's purpose in life is in his name. He's a stick with a string tied around his waist, and you use him to put string along a row of seeds. You know the type of stick. You might even have one yourself. String-along didn't seem keen to go with Imbu to find Grumpy. What you want to find him for? I mean, after all, he's so grumpy and he's always moaning about everything and everyone, said String-along. He might be a bit grumpy, but deep down he has a kind heart, says Imbu. We should all look after each other on the allotment. I mean, you wouldn't like it if you went missing and no one came to look for you. String-along feels the sting of shame creep through his string, so he immediately agrees to help. First they go to visit Neverfall, the compost bin. Neverfall lives next to one of the main paths, so he often sees tools coming and going. Yes, all this time your compost bin really has been watching you. Good morning, Neverfall. Have you seen Grumpy Dibber? He seems to be missing. Oh, it's so hard to think on an empty stomach, says Neverfall, who is always hungry. I can tell you what I know, but I just need my breakfast. Can you feed it to me? Imbu looks around. I suppose I could find some leaves for you. That sounds splendid. I will lift my lid and you can climb up and drop them inside. The inside of the bin is full of old leaves and plants. Imbu loves the idea of composting, but he doesn't want to end up being composted himself, so he leans over the edge of the bin very carefully. It looks a long way down, and he doesn't want to fall in. Here you go, Neverfall. I'm giving you some tasty beetroot leaves. Oh, yummy. Neverfall chomps on his breakfast. You know, I think I did see Grumpy Dibber a couple of days ago. He was heading towards the tangle. Oh, no! Anything could have happened to him if he went to the tangle. String-along looked confused. What's this here tangle, then? Neverfall explains. It's a wild, exotic place where the marrows, squashes, pumpkins and courgettes grow. The squashes and pumpkins have long tendrils which trail across the ground, so the plants all get tangled up together. Oh, all those leaves and stems mingling, tangling, oh! It's like a jungle. It's so easy to get lost. If Grumpy has gone there, he might not have been able to find his way out again. So do we have to go to this here tangle? String-along asks worriedly, his string tightening like a knot round his tummy. Of course we do. We have to rescue Grumpy. We must set off straight away. It took them some time to reach the tangle. And what a tangled place it is. They stopped by a marrow plant on the edge of it. We must keep a careful note of where we're going from here, or we'll get lost ourselves. Stringalong looks around him nervously. He can imagine all sorts of creatures living in the tangle. Imbu, are you sure we won't find things like, dinosaurs living here? Don't be silly, Stringalong. You're letting your imagination run wild, says Imbu firmly. But that didn't stop Stringalong imagining them anyway. He tries to get a grip. He can't afford to start unravelling now. They walk on further and reach the courgettes. They're growing very tall and have thick stems and big leaves like umbrellas. If I climb to the top of this plant, then I'll be able to see right across the tangle, and I can keep a lookout for Grumpy. Imbu is very brave and does not mind climbing things. Stringalong looks more nervous and is becoming a bit frayed round the edges. I think we should tie some string around your leg just in case you fall or get lost or you need rescuing from, like, I don't know, a dinosaur or whatnot. Oh, you are a daft stick. With the string tied around his leg, Imbu climbs higher and higher. Finally, he reaches the top of the courgette plants. Can you see anything there? Anything like a dibber or a T-Rex or whatnot? Imbu looks across a tangle of green leaves. Suddenly, he catches sight of something near the squashes. I see him! He's fallen over by the butternut squash plants. Quick! We must go and rescue him. They run as fast as a stick and a creature with legs made from leftover bits of wire can run. Oh no, Grumpy's squashed here under these here butternut squashes. Grumpy looks up and sees Stringalong and Imbu standing over him. Oh, thank goodness you are here. I've been trapped here for days. I thought no one was ever going to find me, moans Grumpy. Don't worry, Grumpy. We'll rescue you. We just need to get some help. I reckon we'll need something strong enough to help us lift this here squash. Let's go and find our new dibber, Flash Dibber, says Imbu. A new dibber, says Grumpy in horror. Mr. Nooney's got himself a new dibber. Don't you worry about that. Let's just get you out of here. You're not going to leave me again, are you? Says Grumpy, sounding scared. We won't be long, we promise. And Imbu runs off with Stringalong to get help. But where would they find Flash Dibber? Would they find him busy making holes somewhere else? No, they would not. Flash Dibber is a very lazy dibber. He prefers resting and playing to working. You know the type. You might even be one yourself. As soon as he had arrived on the allotment, he had looked for a nice place to have a rest. He found some old netting tied between two poles by the beams. This looks like it will make a nice hammock, he thought to himself as he climbed into it. And it did make a nice hammock. Oh, Flash, we need your help, panted Imbu, who'd been running very fast. Whoa, Flash Dibber yawned. Do you need my help right now? I'm kind of in the middle of my afternoon nap. Imbu could feel himself getting a little bit cross. Yes, we need you right now. We found Grumpy Dibber squashed under some butternut squashes. Oh, well, I suppose I'd better come with you. I guess I can continue with my nap afterwards, said Flash, climbing reluctantly out of his hammock. When they get back to Grumpy, Imbu organises what they have to do. Flash, you must wedge yourself under this squash and lift it up for us. Stringalong, you must tie some string around Grumpy's head and be ready to pull him out. I'm going to lift this squash. Grumpy's worried. Do you think this is going to work? He asked nervously. I really don't want to have to stay here forever. Not knowing there's this new dibber on the scene. Don't worry, Grumpy, I'm sure this will work, says Imbu, who would have crossed his fingers if he'd had any. Okay, well, when I count to 3, Flash and I will lift the squash and String Along will pull Grumpy out. They all took their places. 1, 2, 3. Flash digs himself into the ground and leans back, starting to lift the squash. The squash is very heavy, and Imbu heaves and heaves to help lift it. Nearly got it. Finally, success. They lifted off Grumpy. Pull him out, String Along. Their plan has worked. Grumpy is free. As soon as the work is done, Flash goes hurrying back to his hammock. String Along goes with him, as he likes the idea of a nap too. Imbu helps Grumpy walk back to the shed. They take the path which runs between the runner beans and the raspberry bushes. Grumpy seems very quiet. Imbu is very perceptive for a creature made out of old bits of netting. Are you hurt? Grumpy mumbles something and stops walking. To his amazement, Imbu sees that Grumpy is crying. He's never seen Grumpy upset before. What's wrong? He asks kindly. Oh, well, I was there for days and I thought no one had missed me. I know that I can be a bit grumpy at times, but I don't really mean it. I thought that no one cared that I was missing. Oh, Grumpy, of course we cared. That's why we came to find you. I had even put up posters all round the allotment. Oh, thank you, Imbu. You're a really kind creature. Grumpy sniffs back big salty tears which are springing from somewhere unknown. But I mean, old Mr. Nooney didn't miss me. He didn't look for me at all. After all my years of hard work and loyal service, he just went out and bought himself a new dibber. Grumpy sobs even harder. I love dibbing and making holes. I thought I would always be able to dib on the allotment. I thought I'd never be replaced. Imbu gives Grumpy a handkerchief to help dry his dibber's tears. Oh, don't worry about being replaced, says Imbu with a chuckle. Oh, it's no laughing matter, says Grumpy, wiping his eyes. Honestly, Grumpy, I really don't think Flash Dibber is a sort of dibber who likes dibbing. In fact, I think he's a sort of dibber who wants to avoid working at all costs. Oh, so you think old Mr. Nooney will still have to use me? I think old Mr. Nooney will find that Flash Dibber goes missing whenever there's work to be done, replies Imbu, putting his arm round Grumpy. Grumpy starts to perk up and gives a gruff laugh. So this new Flash Dibber, he doesn't like dibbing, you say? Looks like I will be needed to make the holes all after all. Nobody makes holes as well as you do, Grumpy. You're a legend on the allotment. Oh, don't get carried away, replies Grumpy, but he is very pleased with the praise. Here we are, back at the shed. Oh, before I go inside, I think I'll have a little look round and see what's been happening since I went missing. To Grumpy's relief, everything looks just as he'd left it. He can see a tray of young plants that were ready to be planted, and he knows that he will be the one to make all those holes. Oh, looks like I'll need to make about 40 holes just to plant those seedlings, he says to himself happily. But Grumpy is too tired to make any holes today, so he goes back to his home in the shed and settles himself at the top of the tool bucket so Mr. Nooney can easily find him tomorrow. So the next time you can't find a tool, don't just rush off and order a newer, flashier version. Take the trouble to hunt around for that reliable, old, trusted companion. After all, none of us wants to be replaced by a flash tool, especially one that's come from the tool's life zone. The end.